think one of the most challenging transitions was moving to China when the kids were little.
So what made that transition stand out? Like what is that one, makes that one the highest impact or most monumental?
It went from being a victim to gaining my power and realizing I had the power to change how I thought about it and how I could make this one of the best experiences in our lives, but I could contribute to that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I knew I had to get my mind right, my mind straight. I had to be positive. I had to be all in to get the kids to be all in. And I knew that exposing kids to things like that at that age or any age while they're under your roof just gives them a different sense of the world.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition.
So, welcome back to the Life in Transition podcast. I am super excited and a little bit nervous to have with me a very, very special guest today. It's going to make me cry.
Me
before
too.
We get started. But our guest today is Tonya Blanchford, who has lived all over the world, has successfully raised 3 children, 2 of which are adopted, with all the challenges that comes with that, is my best coach and best friend, an avid tennis player and captain, and the volunteer coordinator for a local charity supporting foster kids that are aging out, Jonathan's Path. Tonya, most welcome.
Thank you.
To the podcast. So jumping right in, what would you consider to be one of the highest impact or most meaningful transitions that you've been through in your life?
Well, being an Army brat for 20 years of my life, I've moved, in those first 20 years, every year and a half to 2 years, it was a transition.
Mm-hmm.
So my whole life was a transition. My whole life has been a transition, one after the other. And, looking back, I think one of the most challenging transitions was moving to China when the kids were little.
So when was that?
That was we left on New Year's Eve, December of 2011.
Mm-hmm.
We flew overnight, arriving
As
New Year's
always,
Day
yeah.
in Shanghai. And away we went. I was there for 2.5 years with the kids.
So what about that transition makes it the most impactful? Like you said, your whole life's been a transition. You've lived so many places from a young child and moving constantly for a long time until you're 40-something. So what made that transition stand out? Like what is that one, makes that one the highest impact or most monumental?
I think that one was just the most challenging because it was a time when I had been away from Tennessee, my home state, for 10 years at that point. I'd been in and out of the state a lot, but really always wanted to come back to live and settle down and raise the kids. And we had been gone for about 10 years, and we'd just gotten back here a year and a half prior to your company wanting us to move over to Shanghai. And I was like, no way. I just got back here and I didn't want to move again so soon.
Right.
It's a lot to move with 3 young kids.
Yeah, for sure.
And we'd just done it a year and a half prior. And to move to a foreign country was...
on the other side of the world.
Was definitely not something I was prepared to do or wanted to do at all. So what made it challenging, though, was that I couldn't find a way to get it in my mind that I was okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I say that is because when I was young growing up and we moved a lot with Dad being in the Army,
Right.
I didn't have a chance to really be okay with any of the moves.
So you didn't get to have input. I mean, that's the way it is in the military. They give orders and you go with it without family. That's pretty much the only choice, right?
Right. And so I just kind of went with the flow with the family and kind of figured things out on my own once I got to wherever we were going. And this move was going to be different because it was just international was the biggest thing. And the kids were so young. And
How old were the kids at that time?
They were in kindergarten, 2nd grade, and 5th grade.
Okay. And you said something earlier. You said that you didn't want to go, but it's different. Like you did have a voice compared to when you were a kid. So what was that process like? And did you not want to go, period? Or did you not feel like you had many options or what?
A little bit of everything. I felt like I said earlier, I'd just gotten back to Tennessee and I really wanted to settle down with the kids
Right.
and just, create a home for them near family. Back down here, because in Michigan, we weren't near family at all. And I felt like we were in a financial position where that move to China would be beneficial to us. And, but I just had a hard time really, like I knew that if I wasn't on board 100%, the kids weren't going to be on board 100%.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I knew I had to get my mind right, my mind straight. I had to be positive. I had to be all in to get the kids to be all in. And I knew that at that point in our lives that this move was important to our family for different reasons. And I really needed to look at what was the best for the family as a whole, not just what I wanted to do.
Not just what was comfortable or easy
Right.
for you. Yeah.
Because as a mom and as a parent, we put our families before ourselves most of the time.
Sometimes too much, yeah.
And every once in a while, whenever we get a little bit of a glimpse of, I'd really like to do something for me. I was back in Tennessee. I'd just done something for me.
Right.
And then to give that up a year and a half later was like heartbreaking in a sense. So I had to really get back on board. Okay.
So how did you do that? How did you, it's not the right word, but it's what's coming up is how did you convince yourself that this was really best? Or let me start before that, because you had to convince yourself. How did you know this is what's best for the family before you convinced yourself? How did you in your own heart know that this was, even if it's going to be very difficult and, you had been to China twice before that, once when we adopted Kaylee and once with the pre-trip.
Right. I had to be on board most of the way before the pre-trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or else I wouldn't have gone on the pre-trip.
Right.
I knew that it was going to be, we were in a financial situation where I knew that this would be really beneficial to us. We could save a lot of money and it was important to us financially. And I knew that it would be a great opportunity for the kids and the family, for all of us to live over in a foreign country together at some point, while we had them at home with us. Because I think exposing kids to things like that at that age or any age while they're under your roof just gives them a different sense of the world. When they live in one place and they're in this one little bubble, it's a different perspective on humanity and cultures. I had friends who lived in one city their whole lives, and here I'd lived in countless. And I had, not that one's better than the other, but just that it's different. And I loved what I had gained from that, being an Army brat. And I wanted my kids to have a sense of that exposure.
So, looking back now, what do you think the benefit has been to the kids to have that sense of exposure? To see, living in China is not like, moving to Iowa or Massachusetts or even to Europe. It's a very different experience.
They were exposed to, they went to the British International School. And at the time, there were about 33 different countries represented in that school. And I was happy about that because they got to see that the world is made up of all kinds of different people, different languages, different cultures, different foods, and different rituals. And that school honored all of that. They had a parade where people dressed up something like their home country's dress, and they got to see how the Japanese dress and how the Indians dress and all these different cultures. So they got to get a broader perspective on the world. And I think it helped them to develop a lack of prejudice for people.
Right.
There are certain areas that are predominantly Caucasian in schools. And that's what a lot of kids grow up with. And they might grow up with prejudices about other cultures or other skin colors. I experienced that when I was young. So I could see how that was easy for our kids to fall into that trap of not having the extra exposure. I just wanted them to be eyes wide open what the world has out there and to travel to different countries and so forth.
So when you lived over in China, how much of that part of the world did you get to see?
Well, we got to see Southeast Asia. We aside from first we went to Australia, which was amazing, and they all loved that. We went to Thailand, Cambodia, and we got to visit the little girl that we were sponsoring in an orphanage at the time, or I forget what kind of home she was in, but something like that. We got to visit her. They got to be interactive with wild animals that they would never have been able to come in contact with, like the elephants and the snakes and all those kinds of the tigers, and actually touch them and hold them and pet them, and the monkeys. And, it's things that we would not really get to do in America. And for better, for worse, if it was safe or not.
Right.
We did it,
We survived.
and it was fun, and it was amazing, and we got to hear a lot of different stories from the people in those countries, and get to hear about how they live.
No, it was really, some great experiences. So you had this sense that this was right for the family, primarily financially, and I think I talked about that in one of my earlier podcasts. But the pivot point for me that put us in that situation, which I want to thank you for here, was the time when when I was burning down the business that we'd started, where I lost most of the money that we had saved for retirement at that point, and was completely beside myself and angry at myself, and how could I leave such a good job and start this business and then burn it down, and really distraught, like I didn't know how I was going to pay the bills, and not wanting to share it with you because you're the planner and you're the one at the time staying home with the very young kids and taking care of everything. And then it was my job to provide, and here I'm not providing. So I didn't even want to share that with you. And I remember the times when, when I couldn't do what I thought was my job. I couldn't carry us financially, and thought therefore that, somehow I wasn't going to be worthy of your love anymore. And the way that you picked me up literally off the floor, and brought me out to our living room from my office there in the house right over here, 1.5 miles away, and had It's a Wonderful Life and popcorn and hot chocolate, 9:00 in the morning on a Friday, blew my mind like that. I thought, wow, she's really with me. Like, this marriage thing is really real.
For better, for worse.
Yeah, and it was such a transformational moment for me to realize that I'm so much more than what I produce, or I'm so much more than the money that I earn for the family. But that was the point, because of that, we were, and then when we had this offer to go run a big company, was a little bit hard, even though we had 2 offers, if you remember. We could have gone to Detroit as well at that time. But the Detroit felt permanent to go be president of North America, whereas China, was a limited contract. And that's why we, and with our daughter being from China, that's why we chose as a family,
right?
Chose to go to China. But I think I want to thank you for, I thank you for that, showing me my worth is much deeper than my performance in such a heart-wrenching and meaningful way. So thank you. What did you learn from this transition? So you moved to China, you made the decision, you realized it's right for the family. You convinced yourself that you could manage as well, even though it's quite difficult, a big challenge. What's one of the big things that you learned coming out of that decision, if you take the decision and the move as part of it, or the whole 2.5 years that you lived there?
Well, a part of it was how I made the mind shift. When we were still here, and I was talking to a friend of ours who is an energy healer type person, I was like, I don't know how to get on board with this, for all the reasons I already mentioned. And I really wanted to.
Right.
I just didn't know how to do it.
So intellectually, you knew it was the right thing, but you couldn't figure out how to get behind it.
I couldn't figure out how to get behind it. And if your kids sense that you are a mess, they're going to be a mess. And especially when they're young, they're really sensitive to that stuff. I think when they're a little older, in teen years, they're a little bit more about themselves.
Well, yeah, and they're distancing and individualizing.
But they were young enough that they were sensing everything. And she said, Tonya, it can be like a light switch. You have to decide that you want to change your mindset about this. You have to decide that you're going to be okay with this. Not knowing how, you just need to decide that you want to make a shift mentally. And once you decide you want to make that shift, then you start thinking about all the positives about that, what's to come. Even if you don't know what they are, just make up stuff. And the two that I knew that were for sure was the financial benefit and the benefit of the kids living overseas, Kaylee getting to see her birth country. Those were for sure. Everything else, I had no idea. I had no idea what was coming. And to look back on it, there's a lot that I would have missed out on had I not decided that I was okay with going.
So those are the two positive things. Did you change your mind right then when you were talking with her? Or did it take some time after that before you shift? Like, what was it like when you had that mind shift of making the decision?
I was like...
that you were going to support this in your heart.
It was like a light bulb went on. I was like, you mean I just have to decide? That's what I said to her. I'm like, I just have to decide. I just have to say, okay. And I have to mean it that, okay, I'm going to do this. She's like, yeah, you just have to decide that you're going to be okay with this.
And not even that you're going to do it, but that you're going to choose it.
Yeah.
Right? That you're going to decide for you, not because you coercion or you have to or whatever, but you're going to decide for yourself. I'm in with this.
Yeah. Yes. And I didn't realize that I could do that. I didn't realize I had that power. And
did that happen right then in the conversation with her?
Yeah. Yeah. Like after I got off the phone with her, my whole energy was different.
Wow.
I felt so different, like a weight had been lifted. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can do this. Like maybe I felt like I couldn't do it. Like I felt like I was, what the heck am I going to get myself into? Are we going to survive over there without me going crazy? I don't know what's going to happen when we get there. But it just kind of all fell like into place. This heavy cloud was lifted, and I felt like I can do this. I can go over there and I could do this, even though I had no idea what was coming, which there was a lot of great things that came from it.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by MidLife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes, you've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do, but you still feel like something's missing, like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. MidLife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition, and we will learn and execute living life with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community.
So how did your mindset change after you decided to be in favor, after you chose for yourself to do this? How did your mindset change? How did that extrapolate into everything else that you were doing?
I started thinking about the positives that, the kids, they'll get to meet kids from other countries. They'll get to learn a different language. I'll get to learn another language. And you would have a great experience working in China. It's different than Germany was. I just started thinking, the food, the places we get to go see, maybe we get to learn about. I was just like, there's a lot of maybes in there. Maybe we'll get to travel to go see this country or that country. I had no idea. But I just kept focusing on those things and thinking, we get some fun things for Christmas for this trip, like headphones, like noise-canceling headphones. You gave me my first pair of noise-canceling headphones. And I was like, with 3 kids on a plane, it's nice to have those.
Absolutely. What I'm noticing when you're talking about this, and this is probably in the mind shift, like before you were talking about, I have to. do this. And now everything you just said, since the mindset shift, everything you said is, I get to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I get to learn a new language. There's a lot of people wouldn't think that's a get to. They would think that's a got to. I have to learn a new language. No, you get to. You get to. You know, so that's. I just wanted to point that out. That's a big shift.
It went from being a victim to gaining my power and realizing I had the power to change how I thought about it and how I could make this one of the best experiences in our lives, but I could contribute to that.
That's pretty powerful to realize you have agency and how that shifts everything else. Like shifts your thoughts, shifts your words, shifts how you look at everything.
Absolutely.
That's pretty powerful. So with that mindset, so then you land on New Year's Day in Shanghai and you're there for 2.5 years. You know, what are some of the good things that came out of it? What are some of the bad things that came out of it? What did you learn looking back now?
Well, I learned that I wasn't the only one going through transition. Everybody who lands in that country for the first time is going to go through a huge transition, especially if they have young children. And I was in contact with those people mostly through the school. And it was like the first month of the transition was all about how do we find English-speaking doctors and dentists and chiropractor, and where can I find just a salad? And, they don't usually serve cold food. They serve cooked food, and I wanted salads. I was, trying to watch my weight and trying to figure out how to get life set up. Where do we find groceries? And how do I get around? The internet was not English-speaking friendly over there.
Yeah. And there was no 3G. There was no. Cell phone directions or anything like that at that point over there.
It was word of mouth.
Yeah.
It was word of mouth, people just talking to people. I think maybe your secretary gave me a couple of ideas about where to find some food. But I mean, we had to get school supplies, shoes that the kids were required to wear at that school.
As part of the uniform, right?
It's not like you just go to the Carnival shoes or Rack Room shoes
or Walmart or whatever.
No, they didn't have any of that. And it was all these little mom and pop shops all over. And there were hundreds of them. And to find the one that had what you needed was like finding a needle in a haystack, unless you knew somebody who heard where you could go.
Right.
And then you'd have to have transportation. They didn't have Uber.
Right.
I mean, we had a driver. Thank goodness for that, because the people who didn't have drivers really struggled. And then your boss asking you or telling you need to get domestic help for your wife to have sanity. That was a huge key to my sanity. It really was. We hired Sheen, and she was amazing. She did the laundry, the cleaning for $3.17 an hour. God bless her. And she loved us, and we loved her.
Yeah.
And she took a huge load off of me. And I saw the difference between that and then other people who came who didn't get domestic help at the time. They struggled emotionally, mentally. Many of them picked up the kids and left and went back home and left their husband there to work for their contract.
Right.
And those families, many of them fell apart. Sometimes the working spouse cheated. I mean, it was horrible for those families. And
so with all this that you learned from when you landed, what did you do with it?
So it all started with a new classmate of Sawyer's, Rosie. And the teacher said, send an email out to all of his classmates' parents. And they said, Rosie's a new student in our class. Here's her mom's email. Please feel free to welcome her and their family to Shanghai. So I did, because we'd only been there a month.
Right.
And I thought, I know how she must feel.
Right.
So I called, or I emailed her, and I said, would you like to get together at Starbucks for a coffee or something? And she said, yeah. And we met there, and we talked, and we just clicked. But what I didn't know until quite some time later is that for the first few months she was there, she was really struggling. She had gone from being an executive to being a full-time mom.
Yeah, trailing spouse.
Doing all the housework and without a vehicle. I mean, she eventually got a bike and then much later got a scooter. But what I noticed was that she made a shift when she found some other purpose, which was to help her neighbor learn English better. And then she decided, because she told me in April, she said, I don't think we're coming back after summer. I think we're going to stay home. And she was really struggling. And then in May, she had been helping her neighbor learn English. And she said, no, I think I'm going to come back. You know, she's feeling useful. And when I came back, we left at the end of June. The kids got out of school. We were here for 6 weeks. And then we went back at the end of August for them to start school. And I felt like when I landed on the ground again for the second time, I thought, I was thinking all the dozens of families that were landing at the same time for the first time, thinking, oh my gosh, where am I going to find sheets? Dishes, lunch boxes. Where am I going to find this stuff? Like there's not an internet you can just go find these things on. And I thought, okay, I know where some of this stuff is. I know we did find some doctors and things. So I thought, well, I'm going to get the flyers, brochures, business cards from the places I know, which was only a handful. And I'm going to invite people through the PTO because I've been working through the PTO. And I advertised through them. I'm going to have like a little monthly coffee at our local coffee shop, Café du Village.
That's right.
And I just was there for them to come and meet people. And it turned into this huge, like in the time that I was there for the next 2 years, where we went from a monthly coffee to at the end, when I left 2 years later, there were probably 7 volunteers running this program. It turned out to be the New Parents Program. We were doing monthly tours with
like tourism,
like
going to see interesting
it was
things.
just for the parents of the kids that went to this school. So we would rent one of the buses that were the school buses for the day. And there was like 40 some odd people that would go. And we'd go to the silk factory and different places around town. We'd go out to lunch. I mean, we'd be gone all day. We'd get back just in time for the kids to get out of school. And then everybody was wanting to have lunches twice a week. So, and then they had a Facebook page and all these things.
But what drove the start of that? I mean, it's all good stuff and lots of connection, but what drove the start of that was?
I felt it was the needing that we need to connect with people.
And to help people land and know where how they can live when they land in Shanghai.
Anybody who lands in a country like that can very easily just be in their house doing housework all day. Go to the grocery store and just be alone.
If they even know where the grocery store is. Or, where to find the food that you want.
And I saw people that did that. And I saw the need for connection with other people who are going through the same thing, we can help each other. And that's why I wanted to have the coffee so we could just talk with each other and network. Where can you find gluten-free food, which was rare back then.
And you had, how many people were in this program when you left? So you had 7 full-time volunteers.
I think that we had probably over 100 people who were in the program. And about 7 that were running it when I left.
They were helping whatever the country people are coming from. They could connect with them in their language.
That was not those. We had the 7 I'm talking about were just the core people. One was planning lunches, one was planning
so sort
Facebook.
of the workers, if you will.
Aside from that, we had a person representing each country that we had parents from.
So you could welcome people coming from that country.
So the Indian person who was in the program could welcome a new Indian family and talk to them in their language if they didn't know English real well. And we did that for all the countries. We represented all the countries as much as we could, at least in languages they could understand or speak, even if they weren't from Germany, but they spoke German. Some way if they couldn't speak English, that we could communicate with them and invite them and come. Everybody has the common language of coffee.
There you go.
Which helped.
There you go. Looking back at this transition now, from the vantage point you have, 13 years later, what would you tell your younger self
that if I didn't go, I would miss out on a lot of opportunities to help other people. I'd miss out on the opportunity to expose my children to these wonderful cultures and trips, experiences. It was huge what we gained from going there. Yes, there were negatives, sure. And the negatives,
everything in life has, right?
Yeah, and the negatives weighed very heavily on me before I made the decision to be on board. That was the problem that I had, was that the negatives were so heavy that I couldn't see how to make it possible in my mind to be on board.
Because all you could see was the negatives.
All I could see was the negatives. But I mean, I knew the two positives, but the negatives were so huge.
And that's where you were putting your attention at the time.
That's where I was putting my attention before I decided I really need to get on board with this if I'm going to make it work.
Interesting. So by focusing on the negatives, it completely was blocking you. Like you had to make that mindset shift first.
Right.
What's something great that you took away from being in Shanghai that you would have not had otherwise?
I learned how to play tennis. And I've been playing tennis for the last, how many years since we've been back? 11 years.
Well, you played there too, so I guess it'd be like 13 years.
Well, I started in 2012.
Yeah.
So it's been 13 years. I've been playing tennis and love it. Love the camaraderie and the teams. I've been captain and co-captain, and I would have never had the time to do that over here, because with young children, like what's that time? I had
there
time.
Isn't any time.
There wasn't any time to do that.
Yeah.
I met some great friends, and I learned how to include people. I'd always done it to some degree, but I was such an introvert growing up that I was the one that needed to be included.
Right.
And then as I got older, and stopped worrying about how, what everybody thought about me, I was less fearful, and I wanted to include the people that felt left out.
Right. So you used that pain you had as a kid to transmute that into something positive.
And feeling, when we first landed, feeling alone, no friends, didn't know anybody at all, except for your work colleagues that I met in the beginning.
Right.
Then I was able to just, when we came back after that summer, I was remembering how I felt, and I was thinking about all the people, dozens of families that were landing there, feeling the same way I did just 8 months before. And I thought, I can help them.
Right.
And we can help each other, because this is not something that a person can do alone.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. That community makes a huge difference. Where do you think your life would be if you hadn't made that mindset shift? If you hadn't, that to me is the tipping point of the transition, was the mindset shift to go to China. Of course, then it started a whole new series of events. But where do you think your life would be if you hadn't made that mindset shift?
I feel like I would have never seen how quickly I could regain my power.
And where, if you extrapolate that, like if you didn't realize you could regain your power and you stayed stuck in that place, where would that go? Where would that lead? What would your life be like now, like say, 15 years later?
Well, just a simple example would be, I loved playing tennis, and I was trying to find ways, teams or leagues or something, and there just wasn't any room for me.
This is once you're back here in Tennessee.
This is once I was back in the States. I really wanted to play in USTA. I was on a NALTA team, which is a Nashville ladies tennis league. But I really wanted to play more than just one day a week. And I wanted to play in USTA, but none of the teams had space for me. And it was because of this experience of realizing I can make this shift, because I was tired of not being able to get on a team.
Right.
I was like, well, I'm going to create my own team.
Right.
And I'm going to invite everybody I know and tell them to invite everybody they know. And somehow we'll figure out how to get 16 people and make a team.
Right.
Because I want to play more.
Right.
And I did. And I captained a team for 4-ish years.
Right.
Which there's like 2 seasons in a year.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful, and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you're looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life. If you're facing challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching, or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets.
So by realizing that there's been other opportunities where I remembered when I was going into a situation that was feeling negative, heavy, I was angry or resentful, or I had all these negative emotions, not all at the same time, but for different situations.
Right.
I know that I don't like being stuck holding that negative emotion. I don't feel good. I'm not projecting that feeling on anybody. They aren't feeling my emotion. So it doesn't do me any good to feel it. So I would use that. I go back and I remind myself, you know what? It's just like switching a light bulb, Tonya. You just have to decide that you want to shift and then look at the positives. And the negatives are always going to be there.
So it's make the decision that you want to. Make up your mind. I love what I've written about this as well, but Ellen Langer is talking a lot about these days about you make the decision and then you make the decision right. There is no right or wrong decision. You make the decision, then you make it right.
I made the decision that I wanted to change how I felt. I wanted to change my circumstance.
Yeah.
Whatever the situation was, making the decision, first recognizing that I could.
Right. And do you think that's, like, I'm thinking about this right now, like, do you think you have to recognize that you could first?
No, I think either way is really okay. For me, I had the wanting to change, but didn't know how.
Okay.
And then
but that's where it starts.
That's where it starts.
Accepting the
wanting.
wanting and make the decision that you're going to without knowing how, and then focus on the positive.
Well, I would say that the process would be wanting to change, realizing I have the power to change it. I don't know how,
How do you realize that? Like, if you're stuck in the negative and you're feeling that you don't have agency, that you don't have the power in your life, and you realize you want to, you accept, hey, I want to do this, even if it's difficult, whatever. How do you realize that you can change it? Like, how do you make that realization?
Well, if you don't believe it, fake it, and just tell yourself, I can change it, I can change it, I can change it, and then start thinking about all the positives. Okay, you don't have to believe that you can, because you can.
Right.
I mean, I'm telling you, you can. Everybody can change and shift their energy and their mindset about something. They have the power to do it. All it took was for someone to tell me that, which is what I'm doing. I'm telling everybody they can change. And then from that, you start focusing on all the positives that are either a positive definitely or potentially, or you make it up.
Right.
Fake it till you make it. You just have to focus on things that make you feel good. And then it's something that I've told our kids growing up. I'm like, what you think about, you bring about. You've got to focus on the positive.
Yeah.
And that is what essentially started bringing the feeling about that situation into a better place.
Nice. How has this transition affected your most important relationships?
I feel like we became a stronger bonded family because my most important relationships are you and the kids. I feel like we were in it together, and we had to figure it out together. You and I mostly. The kids, they saw how we responded to things, But we figured it out. We started game nights with the other families that were new. I mean, we were new. We're just like, we just invited, I think 3 families the first time, which were our kids' friends from school. We didn't even know them until they showed up. We just communicated, I think, by phone or email or something. I don't remember, but they came and we had the parents had games, the kids had games, or else they were just running around wild having fun. But we had beverages and snacks, and we just hung out for hours. And we started doing that every Friday night, Saturday night, because most families over there didn't have anything else to do either. So we worked together. It wasn't just us, but other families. It made it a community effort, and we all made it through with flying colors.
That was one of the things that I loved about being over there, is that people, it feels like, today in America, people are so booked, especially socially. Like, you want to do something, you got to put it on the books, 6 weeks, 6 months out. And there, people would just show up. They'd just come by and say, hey, you got time for a cup of tea or a beer? Mm-hmm. And I love that, mm-hmm. And I love the community that we built there, where there was, less driving kids everywhere that we have in America, where the school took care of transporting the kids to the kids' activities, and more time, also partly because of the help that we had. But it was really nice to have, people that would just pop in. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed that as well, being over there. What are you doing now? I mean, you talked obviously about a big one already in Shanghai, but what are you doing now, other areas in your life where helping other people through transition yourself?
I don't know.
All right. I can think of 2. I mean, one is your kids, obviously, or maybe 3. One is me with what I've been going through my career-wise, but I was also thinking about Jonathan's path and the kids that you're helping in Jonathan's path as well.
Right. Well, I think, like you said, the transition with you, not retiring, but retiring from that, from the automotive world into a different career, that transition's huge. Mm-hmm. And helping you through that, the kids transitioning into adulthood and teaching them how that works.
Right.
It's a daily effort. And the kids with, I don't want to call them kids, they're young adults with Jonathan's path, aging out of the foster care system, they don't have parents to guide them. They don't have families to go have Christmas with, and Thanksgivings and birthdays. And so my fulfillment is getting volunteers to help with the events that we have for the youth, and being there for them, talking to them, letting them know, hey, I'm a human being too, and I care about you, and I want to help you any way I can. And I think that's what all the volunteers want to do. We want to connect with them.
So that's a big transition. Obviously, adulthood is a big transition for anybody. Mm-hmm. But if you've gone from a rocky foundation, maybe even if you've had great foster parents, you're not out of the system at 18. So you're basically homeless at 18. Mm-hmm. So trying to become an adult without any foundation, and trying to survive at 18 years old, that's crazy. I mean, that's a transition that nobody should have to go through by themselves. Right.
Like finding a place to live, a job, transportation, if they don't have money for transportation.
Right. And continuing education, whatever the case is.
Yeah. I mean, it's just basic essentials of life, let alone having a community that cares about you and wants to, spend time with you. And that's part of my inclusivity. Is it inclusivity?
Yeah.
Wanting to include people. And
No, it's wonderful when I go to those events too, the family dinners and stuff. It's always, I have a great time. It's really a lot of fun as well, and connecting and pouring into those. If you could give one tool to our listeners that are going through transition right now, struggling, what would that tool be? That's something that they can do. Anybody can do. They can put pause on the podcast right now and implement this. What would it be?
Well, it's what we were already talking about. One is to know or to hear, even if you don't know it, to hear it, that you've got the power to change. It doesn't feel that way for a lot of people. It doesn't come easy. And there's a lot of doubt in hearing that for many people. And there was,
what can they do to take that first step?
Just
what's
hear
the one
that,
thing?
know that you have the power to change. The first step is to take a deep breath and just want to change. Want to, like, I really don't want this anymore. I don't want to feel this way anymore. I don't want to be in this situation anymore. I want to change my outlook, whatever the case may be. The want is the next step. And then start thinking about all the positives, the potential positives, the for sure positives. For sure ones come up first, and then the potential ones, make them up.
Right.
They don't have to be true.
Right.
They may never happen, but you never know.
But there's a lot of research on that now, that by putting that in our mind, there's a lot higher probability that they come
That's
up,
right.
even if there's no evidence to support it in the beginning. Right.
Right. So that's the fun of it. It's kind of a game. You make it into a game. Like, ooh, what else can I do? What else can be good from this? Who else can benefit? You know, start playing a game and thinking, broadening your mind about how it can be a great thing when you decide to take back your power.
Nice. That's awesome. And again, something anybody can do, and amazing how your life shifted so much in one moment, just choosing to look at things differently and starting by recognizing that you have the power, that you have the agency to do that. No, that's wonderful. So where can people find out more about you if they want to connect with you, or reach out or connect or talk about the things that are important to you, or support Jonathan's path, or join your tennis team, or hear more about your transition and how they can do that? Where can they find you?
Well, they can reach me at my Jonathan's Path email, which is Tonya, Tonya, at jonathanspath.org. And Jonathan's Path has a website as well. I would like to communicate with anybody who wants to email me. I have a Facebook page, Tonya Blanchford. I have Instagram.
Okay.
I think it's called Tonya Loves Tennis.
All right.
But yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, for being a wonderful guest and light you are to the world, and also to our audience here on Life in Transition podcast. And thank you for, loving me and our family so well, and being such a great partner to dance through life together. It's really amazing. Thank you.
You're my rock too. Thanks for having me.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.